There is a mental state that is not taught openly, not because it is too mystical, but because it dismantles the logic of seeking. And everything that dismantles seeking threatens entire systems based on effort, waiting, and trying. This state does not shout, it does not beg, it does not compulsively visualize. It assumes, and when this state is accessed, reality does not react the way it usually does. It reorganizes itself. Fast, not by miracle, but because the command changes place. 1. Awareness of authority. When you stop asking for permission, there is an exact point where reality starts responding differently. It is not when you want more, nor when you try harder, nor when you feel more faith. It is when you stop internally asking for permission to exist in the place you want to occupy. As long as you are asking, even subtly, you position yourself as someone who still depends on authorization. It may not be a verbal request, but it shows up as doubt, as waiting for a sign, as the feeling that something is still missing before you can move forward safely. Reality responds exactly to that position. Reality does not react to your hope. It reacts to the position you take before it. Awareness of authority has nothing to do with external control, inflated ego, or trying to dominate circumstances. It is something much quieter and much deeper. It is when you recognize, without needing to announce it, that you are the origin of the internal command being issued. This state begins when the maybe disappears. Maybe seems humble, but energetically it keeps everything suspended. While maybe exists, there is internal negotiation. While there is internal negotiation, energy fragments. And fragmentation generates delay, not because the universe punishes, but because there is no fixed axis to organize the response. When awareness of authority settles in, something changes in the body. Breathing stabilizes. The mind stops rehearsing scenarios. Urgency decreases. Not because everything is solved, but because the internal position is defined. There is no longer an implicit request, nor a silent wait for approval. This is a sober state. It has no euphoria. It has no fantasy. It has calm firmness. And that is exactly why it is rare. Because it does not feed the search. It ends the search. Whoever enters this state stops asking whether they can. They simply start operating from the place where they already are. This is the first forbidden point. Because whoever assumes internal authority no longer fits into the logic of begging, or waiting, or convincing, and reality, when it perceives this, reorganizes itself to match the new position. 2. Closed intention. A decision that does not seek confirmation. Here we enter an even finer adjustment, and perhaps a more uncomfortable one for the common mind. The difference between open intention and closed intention. Most people believe they have decided something, but they keep talking about it internally all the time. This constant conversation is not clarity. It is a search for confirmation. Open intention is the one you feel the need to explain, justify, or mentally revisit. You decide something and soon after begin building internal arguments to support the decision. It looks like responsibility, but energetically it is leakage. Open intention leaks energy. Closed intention concentrates it. When intention is closed, you decide and end the internal dialogue. It does not mean rigidity. It means the subject is no longer up for debate. The mind understands it no longer needs to rehearse, prove, or convince. And when the mind stops talking, something powerful happens. Energy stabilizes. No mental rehearsals. No internal justifications. This point is difficult because we were trained to believe that thinking a lot is a sign of intelligence. But in the field of manifestation, overthinking is interference. The universe responds to sustained decision, not to explained decision. Defining the outcome without explaining it to yourself is an act of internal maturity. When you stop explaining, you stop asking for approval from your own mind. And that completely changes the signal being emitted. The intention stops being something you want and becomes something you have already incorporated as an internal reference. Closed intention does not seek validation, neither external nor internal. It becomes background. You don't think about it all the time. You don't reinforce it, you don't test it, you live from it. And it is at this point that reality begins to respond with more speed, because now there is a stable axis, Life responds better to those who are not explaining themselves all the time. This is the second forbidden point, because whoever closes the intention stops feeding doubt. And where there is no active doubt, the field organizes itself with precision. 3. Surgical focus, attention without story. This is one of the hardest states to sustain, not because of complexity, but because it requires less thinking and not more. Surgical focus is attention without narrative, without past, without future, without story. Removing past and future from the equation removes weight and anxiety at the same time. The past carries explanations, the future carries expectation. Both pull you away from the only point where something can happen, the now. But not the emotional now, loaded with desire. The sober now, where you already know who you are being. Sustaining the mind only in the now that already knows is radically different from imagining. It is not creating scenes or visualizing results. It is keeping attention on the internal state that has already been decided, without turning it into a story. Thinking less activates faster. When you think less, the body enters coherence. When the body enters coherence, the field responds with speed. Not because you asked better, but because you are no longer interfering. The mind loves to narrate. Surgical focus cuts the narrative. This type of focus may seem empty to those accustomed to constant stimulation. It may even seem boring, but that is exactly why it is powerful. Because it creates no noise, no expectation, no tension. It is clean attention. When attention becomes clean, reality finds space to reorganize itself. Not by force, not by intense visualization, but by absence of resistance. This focus bends reality not because it pushes, but because it removes everything that was blocking it. And this is the third forbidden point, because it eliminates mental effort. Whoever sustains this focus does not fight, does not run, does not beg. They simply remain attentive in the right place, and reality responds. 4. Feeling of normality, the most ignored signal. Here we enter the point that most confuses those who have studied manifestation for years. Most believe the feeling that creates reality is enthusiasm, excitement, or elevated emotion. It is not. These states are unstable. They rise fast and fall fast. The universe does not respond well to peaks. It responds to emotional normality. It is not enthusiasm. It is not intense visualization. It is the feeling of this is obvious. When something begins to be treated internally as obvious, the body stops reacting with alert. The mind stops questioning. Energy stops oscillating. And it is at this point that reality begins to bend more quickly. Reality bends when you treat desire as a common fact. Observe honestly. Everything that has manifested solidly in your life today does not generate excitement. It generates naturalness. You don't think about it all the time. You don't get emotional. You simply live. This is the state the universe recognizes as sustainable. The common mistake is trying to feel something extraordinary in order to create something extraordinary. This generates internal tension, and tension is a sign that it has not yet been accepted as normal. The feeling of normality does not come with noise, it comes with internal silence. When you imagine something and feel a slight relaxation, an absence of urgency, a sense of this makes sense, you are much closer to alignment than when you feel euphoria. Euphoria usually carries fear of loss. Normality carries implicit confidence. This point is ignored because it does not feed the fantasy of seeking. It ends the seeking. When something becomes normal internally, you stop chasing it. And when you stop chasing, the field stops resisting. Normality is not conformism. It is deep acceptance. Accepting does not mean everything is already ready. It means it already fits within you. And what fits within you finds a way to exist outside. This is the fourth forbidden point, because it eliminates emotional drama. And without drama, reality reorganizes itself with much less friction. 5. Strategic inner silence, where the law acts. This is one of the most powerful and least understood states. Inner silence is not absence of thought by force. It is absence of debate. It is when you decide something and stop mentally talking about the process. Stop internally talking about what you are doing. Every mental conversation is interference. Even when it seems positive, planning too much, reviewing too much, analyzing too much creates noise, and noise confuses the field. The universe responds better to clean signals than to long speeches. Silence is not emptiness. It is stabilized command. When the decision is made, the intention is closed, and the feeling has entered normality. Continuing to talk internally about it only reopens the process. It is like messing with something that has already begun to organize itself. The less noise, the more response. This silence is not forced. It arises when you trust enough not to need to explain yourself to yourself. You do not repress thoughts, you simply do not feed them. They pass en rien, you return to the state. There is an important difference here. Strategic silence is not disconnection. It is presence without narrative. You are attentive, but you are not mentally commenting on everything you perceive. The mind was trained to comment. Alignment happens when it learns to observe. In this state, something changes in the body. Breathing becomes deeper, the rhythm slows down, the system exits vigilance mode. And when this happens, the law of attraction begins to act more quickly, because it is no longer being interrupted by every thought. Many manifestations fail, not because of lack of faith, but because of excess internal conversation. The person adjusts the state and then immediately begins to ask if it is working, when it will happen, if they are doing it right. That dismantles the field. Silence sustains what the word has already defined. This is the fifth forbidden point, because it requires emotional maturity. Whoever accesses this silence does not seek confirmation, and whoever does not seek confirmation enters another level of response. 6. Inevitable action, movement that does not exhaust. Here something happens that surprises those who have always lived in effort. When all the previous states are aligned, action does not need to be provoked. It arises, not as obligation, but as consequence. Action arises without forced motivation. You don't push yourself. You don't pressure yourself. You don't create lists to convince yourself. You simply perceive the next step, and it feels logical, even too simple. But that is exactly what makes it effective. You act because it makes sense, not to provoke a result. When action comes from alignment, it does not consume energy. It returns it. Even when it requires courage or discomfort, it brings a sense of internal order afterward. This is the greatest indicator that the action is inevitable, not forced. When aligned, acting does not exhaust. Most people associate exhaustion with the amount of action. It is not. Exhaustion comes from acting against your own state. When you act misaligned, every step weighs. When you act aligned, movement flows. This action is usually not dramatic. It can be a postponed conversation, a simple adjustment, a small decision that shifts the axis. The impact does not come from the size of the act, but from its coherence with the internal state. Inevitable action does not seek immediate results. It confirms identity, and confirmed identity organizes reality. The universe responds better to those who act from clarity than to those who act trying to control the outcome. Forcing action creates shortcuts that return to the beginning. Inevitable action creates continuity. This is the 6th forbidden point, because it eliminates the logic of heroic effort. Whoever acts from this place does not feel like they are fighting life. They feel like they are walking with it. 7. Receiving without analysis, except before understanding. This is one of the rarest points to be truly lived. Not because it is difficult, but because it goes against a deep conditioning. The mind was trained to analyze everything before accepting. In the forbidden state, this order is reversed. Here you accept before you understand. Not questioning the way something arrives is not naivety. It is internal maturity. When you have already adjusted authority, intention, focus, feeling, silence and action, the next step is not evaluation. It is permission. Overanalyzing closes the channel. Every time something begins to move and you immediately enter excessive analysis, you interrupt the flow. The mind tries to regain control. It wants to understand the reason, predict consequences, measure risks, compare with what it imagined. This creates micro-resistance. Receiving requires openness without immediate explanation. Many adjustments arrive disguised, an unexpected invitation, a change that does not seem ideal at first, and ending that open space. When you are aligned, life begins to reorganize pieces, not always in the way the ego planned. The forbidden state recognizes coherence before logic. You feel that something makes sense before you can explain why. The body accepts it. The mind does not yet know how to argue, but something internal does not go into alert. This is the most reliable signal of correct receiving. Questioning everything is an old defense habit. When you are in this state, it does not mean you will never analyze again. It simply means you do not block first in order to understand later. You accept the movement, enter it, and clarity comes afterward. Accepting before understanding is not losing control. It is leaving the illusion of control. The less you try to dominate the format, the more the flow is maintained. Reality responds better to those who trust the state they have built than to those who try to police the process. This is the seventh forbidden point, because it ends the need for guarantees. Whoever lives here does not demand immediate explanations from life. And curiously, this is when answers begin to appear more clearly. 8. Invisible maintenance, sustaining without watching. Here is the closure of the forbidden state. It is not creating. It is not bending. It is not receiving. It is maintaining without interfering. Most people break the process precisely here. Invisible maintenance does not call attention. It does not watch. It does not test. It does not demand. Do not monitor. Do not check. Do not keep verifying whether it is still working. The state remains as long as you do not interfere. Every time you begin to watch, you leave the state and enter control. Control creates noise. Noise reopens the process, and what was organizing itself needs to stop to deal with the interference. Returning to the state is different from reinforcing the state. You do not need to repeat phrases. You do not need to visualize again. You do not need to prove anything. You simply return to the same internal place whenever you notice the mind tried to take command. This maintenance is silent. No one sees it. No one validates it. No one applauds it. And that is exactly why it is powerful. Because it does not depend on external stimulus. It depends only on internal familiarity. The bend remains as long as you do not interfere. This point requires emotional maturity. It is here that many fall, not by failure, but by anxiety. They want confirmation, they want a sign, they want certainty. But the forbidden state asks for none of that. It remains. And it is in this remaining that reality stabilizes in the new format. If you made it this far, that already says something important about you. This content is not fast, not shallow, and not comfortable for the common mind. Whoever stays until this point is already operating differently. So do the following. Write in the comments a word that represents the state you felt while listening to this. One single word, not to explain, to register, and subscribing to the channel, in this context, is not following videos. It is maintaining proximity to this state, so the old mind does not retake command tomorrow. It is a practical way to sustain the frequency you just accessed. If you truly understood what was said here, something important must be clear. None of this works because it is a new technique. None of this works because it is secret. It works because it removes excess. You do not need to add more effort to your life. You need to stop operating from seeking. The state you just accessed does not ask for confirmation. It does not demand proof. It does not defend itself. It simply remains. Just remain. When you remain, reality understands. And when it understands, it responds without warning, without effort, without delay. This is the true turning point.